A long-awaited sequel hits Netflix today. The Old Guard 2, starring Charlize Theron and showcasing Uma Thurman as the adversarial Discord. Despite high expectations, critics suggest the film's explosive action and A-list talent can't prevent it from drowning in narrative inertia and emotional flatness. A sequel weighed down by expectation. Directed by Victoria Mahoney and scripted by Old Guard creator Greg Rucka. The Old Guard 2 revisits Theron's Andy, a warrior who has lost her immortality. The plot centers on the reemergence of Quinn, Veronica Ingo, inadvertently left trapped at the ocean's bottom for centuries, now hellbent on avenging Andy's abandonment with the help of Discord, a new enemy played by Thurman. Yet the setup, once ripe with emotional potency, is burdened by tedious pacing and underwhelming action. Critics describe the movie as dreary and lifeless, lamenting a lack of novelty, and charging the sequel with lethargic character arcs and forgettable battles. When dramatic promise fizzles, what sets the sequel back, according to reviewers, is the sidelining of its emotional core. The viewer is reminded of Quinn's horrific 500-year drowning. But there's little growth or catharsis, just recycled guilt and sorrow. Andy's grief over losing immortality translates visually into repeated sighs and brooding expressions, with minimal evolution in her journey. Commentators also point to the film's reduced emotional urgency. Where the first installment grounded its immortals in pain and purpose, the sequel replaces that depth with generic violence and ill-defined stakes. The ensemble, including Kiki Lane, Chiwetel Ejiofor, Marwan Kenzari, Luca Marinelli, and Matthias Schoenaerts, is largely underutilized, exacerbating a sense of redundancy. Action collisions fall flat. The high-octane face-off between Theron and Thurman's characters was marketed as a showdown of titans, but critics say it underdelivers, suffering from poor lighting, blurred choreography, and mistakes typical of overfamiliar setups. At best, there's glimpses of dramatic potential, but the fight scenes come across as functional rather than thrilling. Similarly, the film's broader action set pieces feel perfunctory. A mansion raid, a sprawling finale in murky Indonesian settings. None resonate emotionally or visually to justify screen time. Instead, these sequences reinforce the feeling of filler used to bridge toward yet another cliffhanger installment. Cultural currency stifled. The first Old Guard was praised for blending comic book spectacle with real human vulnerability. Immortality was a vehicle to explore identity, purpose, and relationships, like Joe and Nikki's gay romance. The sequel attempts continuity, hinting at queer undertones between Andy and Quinn, but hesitates to commit. Their bond remains coded rather than explicit, which critics describe as cowardly and disappointing. The male couples get minimal screen time too, empty nods to camaraderie rather than heartfelt expansion, leaving LGBT+ representation flatter than before. Does the sequel leave space to breathe? Film writers argue that The Old Guard 2 functions more like a mid-season installment than a satisfying sequel. It pivots heavily on expanding rules of immortality, with ancient libraries, mystic revelations, diasporic flashbacks, yet lacks thematic momentum. Without resolving its threads, the story trails off into half-baked cliffhangers, lacking a self-contained narrative arc. Bright spots that flicker. Despite its shortcomings, The Old Guard 2 still touches the emotional core in fragments. The reunion combat between Andy and Quinn carries dramatic promise, and minor moments, like the developed chemistry between Theron and Lane, or the Joe-Nikki couple, offer hints of what the franchise once excelled at. Henry Golding's Tua adds historical context, while Thurman presents a flashy antagonist. Her star power alone momentarily energizes the narrative. And behind the scenes, Theron's investment remains evident. She performed her own stunts and served as a producer, underscoring her commitment despite structural film issues. Final verdict. On balance, the sequel underwhelms. Critics warn that Theron and Thurman's performances, though accomplished, can't rescue a disjointed script and lackluster direction. The film struggles to recapture its predecessor's emotional gravity or its gritty yet thoughtful superhero style, leaving audiences for whom the first film resonated feeling disconnected and unfulfilled. Yet hope remains that while this sequel may have floundered, the narrative bridges do suggest a third entry where characters and themes might finally find resolution or risk final collapse.